They laughed when the Vanguard entered the Galactic fleet. It wasn't just slow, it was ancient, clunky metal plates bolted together like someone had built it in a junkyard, then forgot to throw it away. No sleek curves, no quantum core, no warp fins. The alien commanders nicknamed it the Junkyard Whale. Some even placed bets that it wouldn't survive a single battle. Standing on its bridge was Captain Marcus Hale, a battle-hardened man with stormy eyes and a voice like gravel. His record was spotless, but he carried himself like someone who'd been burned too many times by command decisions. His crew, a chaotic mix of Earth's military outcasts, techs banned for unauthorized innovation, soldiers with disciplinary marks, and a combat pilot who still wore a leather jacket from the 20th century. The Vanguard was the Galactic Union's embarrassment, a slow, lumbering symbol of Earth's desperation to stay in the game. While the Valex flew shimmering organic ships and the Irithy road vessels made of liquid crystal, Earth offered up this relic, fueled by a refurbished nuclear core and patched together with parts from freighters, mining rigs, and maybe a few washing machines. When the Urech invasion hit, the Union barely acknowledged Earth's contribution. The Uratech weren't just hostile, they were abominations, machines spliced with meat, guided by a hive AI older than most known civilizations. They didn't invade, they consumed. Planets fell in hours. Civilizations vanished in weeks. Still, the Union assigned the Vanguard to rear patrol, away from the real war, far from glory or danger, babysitting empty sectors while others died at the front. Hale didn't argue. He just looked at his XO, Lieutenant Ramey, sharp as a scalpel with a fuse as short as her temper, and said, "Let them laugh, we know what we've got." Because the Vanguard had secrets, she may have been slow, but she wasn't soft. Marcus Hale and his team had hollowed her out and rebuilt her with ancient brutality. Her armor was triple-layered titanium with reactive gel buffers. Her main guns were mass accelerators capable of cracking battle cruisers in half. No AI, no integrated neural systems, everything analog, dials, buttons, vacuum tubes, a walking relic immune to digital corruption. The Urech didn't see her coming because they couldn't. And buried deep in her belly, protected behind meters of light and steel, was Earth's last hope, Project Cassandra. Not a weapon in the traditional sense, something worse, something that shouldn't exist but did, because humans are good at building things they were never meant to control. The joke ended in blood when the first Union fleet got shredded in the Olen Belt. 500 ships gone in 6 minutes. The Urech didn't just destroy, they infected hacked systems, turned fleets against themselves. But the Vanguard was dark to them, a ghost ship. No digital signature, no neural net, just silence and static. "New orders," Ramey muttered, tossing a crumpled printout on Hale's console. "They're pulling everyone forward. We're officially on frontline support. I think they're desperate." Hale didn't blink. He stared at the empty stars and muttered, "Took them long enough." Then louder, "Warm the coils, spin up Project Cassandra. Let's make sure they notice us this time." Below deck, an engineer turned an old key in a steel box. Lights dimmed across the ship. The hull groaned. Somewhere deep inside, something began to stir. The Vanguard might be slow, but she was never meant to run. She was made for one thing, to be the last nightmare anyone would ever see. The stars flickered around the Vanguard, but inside, everything was silent except for the low hum of old engines waking up. Every screw and bolt in the hull felt like it was shaking off centuries of dust. Somewhere near engineering, a warning klaxon gave a tired cough and then finally came to life, wailing out its groan like it hadn't screamed in decades. Marcus Hale stood on the bridge, staring at the big circular display showing the Union fleet. They were clustered just ahead near a dead moon, reorganizing after another Urech ambush. Half of them were limping. The rest looked more like scattered survivors than a battle-ready task force. "They're scared," Ramey muttered beside him, her arms crossed, jaw tight. "Every ship in that group is running backups on backups. They're practically rebooting themselves in circles." "They should be scared," Hale replied, "but fear without direction is just chaos." Behind them, Commander Knox, an ex-Marine with a cybernetic spine and 2 missing fingers, stepped onto the bridge. "Cassandra's warming up. The containment ring is stable for now, but when we fire it up for real, we're on a timer. You know that, right?" Hale nodded. "I'm counting on it." He didn't explain further. He rarely did. He had a habit of keeping the full plan in his head until the last second. Ramey hated that about him, but she'd served long enough to know that when Marcus Hale said, "Wait," you waited, because whatever he was about to do was going to be insane and probably work. The Vanguard eased its way towards the edge of the fleet formation. The rest of the ships shifted aside like a herd, avoiding a diseased animal. Some even powered down their external comms. No one wanted to be connected to this embarrassment when the next wave of Urech hit. On the main screen, flashes of light began to bloom, faint at first, like fireflies dancing in a storm. But Hale knew what they were: Urtek scouts, mechanical filth spiders with plasma-laced legs, machines that whispered in static and left nothing behind but drifting corpses and signal noise. "Here they come," Knox said grimly, watching as several dots peeled off from the edge of space. They didn't move in formation, never did. They swarmed like insects, too fast and too chaotic for most targeting systems to track. "Hold fire," Hale said, "not yet." A younger officer, Ensign Keeler, barely 22 and fresh from Earth, glanced up from his terminal. "Sir, they're approaching fast, shouldn't we?" "No," Hale cut in, "let them get closer." The bridge was quiet again. Keeler swallowed hard and returned to his console. His fingers trembled, but he didn't argue. The Urtek scouts began zipping through the outer fleet, picking at smaller Union ships like piranhas. One corvette blinked out in a flash of red as its own AI turned against it, ramming the ship straight into a fuel frigate. The explosion was massive. The fleet started to scatter, trying to reposition. Still, Hale didn't move. "They're ignoring us," Ramey whispered. "Because they don't see us," Hale replied, voice calm. "They're trying to infect systems, corrupt code, bend smart metal. The Vanguard is blind to them. It's like we're not even here." Then he turned to the comms officer. "Open up a channel, all frequencies." "Sir?" The officer hesitated for a moment before tapping into the broad-spectrum comm array. An ancient analog unit bolted to the floor, humming like a wounded animal. No encryption, just raw, old-school broadcast. Marcus Hale leaned into the mic. "To the Union fleet, you fought this war the wrong way. We gave the enemy everything it needed: networks, AI, digital vulnerability. It's not strength they use against us, it's our own systems." He paused. "This is Captain Marcus Hale of the warship Vanguard. We don't run software. We run steel, grit, and fire. Fall back, let us handle this." A long silence answered. Then a Urech vessel, larger than the rest, a twisted hybrid of steel and wet tissue, peeled from the stars and came straight toward the Vanguard. It was hideous, a churning, screaming thing with a glowing brain-like mass pulsing in the center of its hull. It leaked black plasma as it flew, and its weapons glowed with that same sickly green energy the Union had learned to fear. But it didn't fire, it just scanned. Then it blinked like a glitch, confused. There were no systems to hack, no firewall to corrupt, no neural map to invade, just raw metal. That's when Hale whispered, "Now." The technician in engineering threw the final lever. Cassandra came online. The Vanguard began to vibrate, not shake, not rattle, but vibrate like it was humming along with some song no one else could hear. Lights dimmed, the air thickened. The sound of the engines dropped into a deep, bone-rattling growl. Project Cassandra wasn't a gun. It was a gravitational implosion device, an illegal, unsanctioned weapon pulled from a banned Earth experiment in dark energy. The Vanguard had been rebuilt around it like a church built around a buried god. Energy began to pull at the nose of the ship, not light, not plasma, just force, a ripple in space itself. And then Hale gave the command, "Fire." The ship didn't make a sound, not at first. The Cassandra device released its pulse and reality bent. The space between the Vanguard and the approaching Urech ship folded, then snapped. And the Urech ship was gone, not exploded, not vaporized, just erased. A hole remained, spinning, collapsing in on itself like a dying scream. The remaining Urech scouts pulled back in disarray, their chaotic swarm disrupted by the disappearance of one of their own. Union ships stopped firing. Everything stopped. The Vanguard stood alone in space, surrounded by silence and the faint gravitational echo of its kill. "Jesus," Ramey whispered, "we just deleted a cruiser." "Not deleted," Knox said quietly. "We disconnected it. Cassandra didn't kill with fire or lasers, it unraveled spatial anchoring. Anything hit by it ceased to exist within normal physics. Not even debris remained." Hale leaned back in his chair. His eyes didn't blink. "We built Cassandra to be the last word in any war, and we were afraid to use it until now." The comms lit up, Union commanders demanding answers, wanting specs, shouting questions. Hale ignored them. Instead, he turned back to the stars. More Urech were coming, hundreds, thousands. He could already see them swarming in the distance, reorganizing, rethinking their strategy. And now they saw the Vanguard not as a ghost, not as a joke, but as a threat. "Prepare Cassandra for recharge," Hale said. 20-minute cooldown, Knox warned. "After that, we can fire again, maybe twice before the core burns out." Hale gave a slow nod. "We won't need more than that." Then he did something strange. He smiled. "They wanted war," he said. "Now they've got one." The silence after Cassandra's first shot was almost painful. Out in the void, the Union fleet drifted like a stunned animal, unsure whether it had just witnessed a miracle or a violation of every natural law. On every ship, commanders stared in disbelief at their sensor logs. Even the Urech paused, if such things could be said to pause. The usual chaos of their movements slowed, their swarm formation coiling like a nest of metallic serpents circling a threat they suddenly understood might bite back. Marcus Hale stood on the bridge, still and silent. "The status?" he asked. Lieutenant Ramey was already scanning the boards. Hull integrity stable, no breaches, energy systems holding, but the Cassandra core is hot, cooling is engaged, but it's pulling every ounce from the backup reserves. Knox stepped forward. "We'll be able to fire again, but not at full power. If we push it too soon, we might breach the core chamber, and if that happens, we won't be around to regret it," Hale finished flatly. The crew was tense but focused. There was no celebration, no cheering. They all understood what Cassandra represented: not a victory, a warning, a line crossed that should never have been drawn in the first place. The tactical screen flickered. Dozens, no, hundreds of Urtek vessels were accelerating toward them, breaking away from other battle groups like the rest of the war no longer mattered. The Vanguard had their full attention now. Keeler looked up from his console, pale-faced. "Sir, they're converging, a full cluster, estimated 230 ships, and they're forming a wall, a containment pattern." "They want to surround us," Ramey muttered, "isolate the threat." "They think we're the virus now," Knox said, almost smiling. Hale's jaw clenched. "Good, that means they're scared." He stepped closer to the display. The Vanguard was a single blip in the middle of a forming spiral of death. Most captains would have ordered a retreat, called for reinforcements, waited for a coordinated response from the Union. But Marcus Hale had never been most captains. "Bring us into the mouth of their formation," he ordered. "Direct path, full burn." Ramey turned to him, blinking. "You want to drive right into a 200-ship death swarm?" "Oh yes. Without Cassandra ready." "Oh yes." There was a beat of silence. Then she turned back to her console without another word. She didn't agree, but she trusted him enough to obey. "Keeler," Hale said, "patch me into the fleet again." The ensign hesitated for only a second. "You're live, sir." "This is Captain Marcus Hale of the Vanguard. We're engaging the enemy swarm head-on. Don't try to stop us. Don't try to help. Stay back and protect your flanks. You're not built for this." He cut the channel before the inevitable shouting could come through. The ship began to lurch forward, its engines roaring like monsters from some ancient hell. The Vanguard wasn't fast, but it was unstoppable, like an avalanche or a funeral march, one that didn't care what lay in its path. Ahead, the Urech were moving with perfect, inhuman coordination. Ships of every shape and size, crab-like destroyers, spider frigates, snake-bodied carriers, folding around each other, building layers of firepower and interception grids. They weren't taking any chances. Hale stood in the middle of the bridge, silent as the enemy formation swallowed their view. His eyes were distant, locked not on the immediate threat but on memory, a memory of Earth, of the labs that created Cassandra, of the warning labels stamped in red: unstable, unpredictable, unacceptable. Of his brother screaming through a sealed window as the first prototype imploded a test chamber in half a mountain. Cassandra was a weapon of grief, a weapon of shame, and now it was humanity's best hope. 2 minutes to breach point," Ramey called out. Her voice was steady, but everyone could feel the tension under it. The crew braced for impact. Then the first wave hit. Urech fighters swarmed in from all sides. Unlike Union vessels, the Vanguard couldn't rely on automated defense grids or smart drones. Everything was manual, every turret fired under human control, every kill was earned. The gunners came alive. Turrets roared, coils screamed. The air inside the ship grew hotter with every second, every discharge of kinetic rounds slamming out into the void like angry thunder. The old guns of Earth, polished and tuned to perfection, struck with precision that even AI targeting systems would envy. Fighter after fighter exploded into clouds of metal and gore, but there were too many. The Vanguard took hits. The ship groaned under the weight of the assault. Sparks flew across the bridge as a conduit blew overhead. Emergency lights flickered on. "Incoming on port hull," shouted Knox. "Brace for impact." A kamikaze drone slammed into the side of the ship. The explosion rocked the decks. For a moment, Hale saw stars through a crack in the ceiling plating. "Seal that breach," he barked. "Reroute power from secondary comms to structural shielding." "Done," Ramey shouted, fingers dancing across her controls. Despite the hits, the Vanguard pushed forward. Then finally, the Cassandra system pinged green. Core stabilized, Knox said, "We're ready." Hale gave no verbal order. He simply raised a single hand, a gesture, and the trigger was pulled. This time, the effect was different. Instead of targeting one ship, Cassandra's field was spread, a low-yield, wide-range pulse. A ripple that warped gravity in a cone ahead of them, not powerful enough to erase but strong enough to break. Dozens of Urech vessels suddenly buckled in space, their trajectories folding violently as spatial distortion tore into them. Several collided, unable to maneuver. Some vanished in bursts of green-black flame. A larger cruiser split in half, its spinal core unraveling like threads in water. The swarm broke, chaos erupted among the Urech ranks. Their perfect coordination shattered, ships collided, others retreated, the wall collapsed. "Open us a lane," Hale growled, and the crew obeyed. The Vanguard cut through the disorganized enemy like a rusted axe through flesh. Gunfire never stopped, not for a second. The entire bridge felt like a battlefield. No shields, just brute force. The Vanguard didn't look beautiful while it killed. It looked terrifying, finally, after what felt like hours but was only minutes, the last of the immediate swarm pulled back. On the tactical screen, dozens of Union vessels began pushing forward, emboldened by the destruction Hale had carved through the enemy line. Fighters launched, cruisers rallied, humanity's broken backbone had straightened. They'd just seen a ghost ship become a monster. The bridge was a mess, smoke curled in the air, blood smeared one of the side panels where a junior officer had been thrown from her seat. Medics pulled her away. Hale lined on the rail in front of the viewplate, staring at the drifting wreckage of Urech ships. "We're not done," he said quietly. Knox coughed, pulling off a bloodied glove. "We just crippled 200 ships, you sure about that?" "They were testing us," Hale said. "That wasn't their real wave, that was a probe, they're gathering data, adjusting." He turned toward Raimi. "Get ready for the next one." She nodded. "And what about Cassandra?" He looked down at the readout. Cooling offline, core integrity 62%, remaining charges 1. "One more shot," he said, "that's all we've got." Knox raised an eyebrow. "Then what?" Hale's voice dropped to a whisper. "Then we make them bleed the old way." The air on the bridge felt thick, like it had absorbed too much tension to circulate properly. The smoke from damaged consoles clung to the walls, coiling through the vents and leaving a chemical stench behind. No one spoke for a long moment. They didn't need to. Every crew member knew what they were staring down now. The tactical display flashed again, new contacts, hundreds more, and this time they were organized. "Confirmed," Raimi said, her voice calm despite the flickering screen. "Looks like another wave. Bigger, faster, denser formation." "How many?" Hale asked. She hesitated. "Best guess, close to 1,000. Knox gave a low whistle. "And we've got one round left." "No," Hale said. "We've got one round, a stubborn crew, and a ship too stupid to die." Keeler, still nursing a burn on his left hand from the last overload, looked up. "Sir, incoming Union communication. Admiral Vayath from the Crescent Dawn. Priority override." "Unmuted." "But I said..." "Unmuted." Keeler tapped the console reluctantly. Hale knew exactly what the Admiral wanted to say: fall back, regroup, wait, let the smarter ships handle it. The Union brass had never liked the Vanguard. They only tolerated it now because it was winning. That didn't mean they trusted it or him. Raimi turned from her station. "The second wave will be on us in 3 minutes, but this one's not acting like the last. They're not swarming, they're forming rings." Knox frowned. "Like containment rings." "No," she said, squinting at the screen. "Defensive spheres, they're protecting something." Hale walked up to the display, arms folded across his chest. His eyes tracked the pattern of ships, tight layers, rotating, shielding a core cluster, and inside that core a single ship. Massive, bigger than any Urech vessel they'd encountered. "Is that," Keeler leaned in, "is that a flagship?" "No," Hale muttered, "that's their queens." It had to be. The Urech didn't have leadership like humans. They had command nodes, biomachines with tactical control over the swarm. The thing at the center wasn't just a ship. It was a brain, a floating brain the size of a Union capital city, wrapped in metal, thrumming with data so thick it glowed like lightning through its skin. "That's our target," Hale said. Knox looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "You want to shoot Cassandra at that? It's surrounded by 1,000 ships." "And that's exactly why we need to do it." Raimi gave a slow nod. If we take it out, the rest of them might fracture, lose coordination, collapse into disarray. They won't collapse, Hale said, but they'll get dumb. Sloppy, they'll start fighting like animals again, and we can beat animals. Knox walked to the wall panel and punched in the override code for Cassandra. The display lit up with warnings. Final charge detected. Core stability 58%. System status unpredictable. Recommend abort launch sequence. He looked over his shoulder. We fire this, we might crack the ship in half. We're not here to survive, Hale said. We're here to finish something Earth started. He tapped into the comms again, this time speaking directly to his crew, not the Union fleet. This is Captain Hale. We've got one shot left with Cassandra, one chance to take out the Urech command node. We hit it, we break their hold on this sector, we miss and we die. He let that sink in. We didn't build this ship to be fast, we didn't build it to be pretty, we built it to be angry, and if we're going down swinging. One by one, voices started replying over the ship's internal comms. Engineering ready, gunnery ready, medical secured, emergency lockdown in place. Deck 7 is patched and sealed, sir. We're with you. Hale nodded. All right, let's aim for the Queens. The Vanguard began moving again, slow and defiant. Every plate on its hull was scorched. A dozen sections were sealed by emergency bulkheads. 2 turrets had been reduced to melted slag, but it kept moving. The Urech noticed. The defensive rings began to shift, adjusting as they realized the Vanguard was pushing forward. Some of the outer ships peeled away, trying to intercept. Targeting locked, Ramey said. Queen node is within the Cassandra firing path in 80 seconds. Distance 15 clicks and closing. Too far, Hale said. We need to get closer, get inside their shell. Knox looked at him. You want to thread the ship through 1,000 enemy vessels. Hale smiled without humor. Yeah, and if they don't like it, they can try and stop us. The next 60 seconds were hell. Urtech ships dove at them from every angle. The gunners on the Vanguard were relentless, mowing down anything within range, but the enemies kept coming. Explosions rocked the ship. Damage reports poured in, hull breach on Deck 4. Fire in reactor sub-bay 3. Portside comms completely offline. Still, they moved forward, closer. Then the command came, fire Cassandra. Everything on the ship went dark. The lights flickered once, then died completely. Even emergency power blinked out for a full 2 seconds. The Vanguard became a tomb drifting in silence. Then the pulse released. No sound, just gravity screaming. The space between the Vanguard and the Queen node folded in on itself. Not a beam, not a blast, a collapse of dimensional tension that burst outward in a shock wave too unnatural for even physics to understand. It tore through the Urech defenses like paper. Dozens of ships were caught in the spatial backlash, twisting, warping, their hulls stretching and snapping like rubber bands. The Queen node's shielding flared, pulsed once, and then buckled. Its core began to crack like an egg under pressure. Biomechanical skin peeled back. Fluids vented into space like arterial spray. Electrical surges flared across its outer frame. Then it imploded. Everything went white. When the bridge lights returned, most of the crew were on the floor, thrown from their posts. Sparks fell like snow from the ceiling. But the screen showed only one thing: the Queen node was gone, and the Urtech they were scattering. Every ship in the swarm broke formation, some fled, others drifted. Coordination was gone. Hale's gamble had worked. The Union fleet began to surge forward, pressing the advantage. 1,000 voices across space erupted in celebration, but the Vanguard had paid the price. Status? Hale asked, coughing. Knox helped Ramey up. She had a cut over her eyebrow but waved him off. Cassandra is done, she said. Melted straight through the core housing. The main reactor is unstable. If we don't shut it down manually, we lose the ship. Knox finished grimly. Hale didn't hesitate. Evacuate. What? Ramey blinked. We can still hold her together. You have 5 minutes, Hale snapped. Get the crew to the escape pods, that's an order. What about you? Keeler asked. Hale looked out at the wreckage of the Queen node. I've got unfinished business in engineering. Ramey stepped forward, voice low. You don't need to die for this. Hale met her eyes. We all died when Earth built Cassandra. I'm just cleaning up the mess. Alarms wailed like dying animals as Hale walked the burning halls of the Vanguard. Every step echoed with the sound of groaning metal, gas vents hissing, and electrical arcs snapping like tiny whips in the smoke-choked corridors. The ship was coming apart not from enemy fire but from within. The last blast from Cassandra had been too much. Power relays overloaded. The backup containment rings were blown. The main reactor, already overworked, was spiraling toward critical. And deep inside the belly of the ship, the Cassandra core, warped, cracked, bleeding radiation, was ticking like a bomb. Hale passed two crew members dragging a wounded technician toward the escape pods. They paused when they saw him. "Captain, are you?" "Go," he ordered, waving them off. "Get to the pods." "But sir, I said go." They didn't argue again, they moved fast. There was no time to waste. Hale continued toward engineering, coughing into the crook of his arm as the smoke thickened. His lungs burned. Sweat ran down his back despite the cold of the ship's failing climate system. Systems flickered, sparked, failed, but he kept walking. He wasn't afraid of death, not anymore. He'd made peace with that a long time ago, back when Project Cassandra was first greenlit, before his brother had died testing its prototype, before Earth had buried the weapon and promised to never speak its name again. He had broken that promise, for victory, for survival, for humanity. The main reactor room was a furnace when he arrived. The bulkhead had partially collapsed, forcing him to crawl under twisted beams. Inside, lights strobed red. Radiation warning klaxons screamed in his ears. The massive cylindrical core at the center of the room was pulsing erratically, its heat shields groaning under the strain, and in front of it, desperately typing into a scorched control console, was Knox. "Hale froze, you're supposed to be gone," he barked. Knox didn't look up. "And let you play the hero alone? Hell no. You disobeyed a direct order." "Yep." Knox tore a melted panel from the wall and jammed a power bypass tool into the guts of the system. "Sue me later." Hale stormed over, furious. "You'll die down here." Knox grinned through gritted teeth. "So will you. This way we can at least argue about it all the way to hell." Despite everything, Hale cracked a small smile. "What's the plan?" he asked, kneeling beside him. "The core is on cascade," Knox explained quickly. "Can't shut it down, but I can eject it." "Eject it?" Hale blinked. "Into open space." "Exactly. We dump the entire thing. Cassandra's melted into the main reactor, but if I can override the mag clamps and decouple the feed lines, we can jettison the whole core chamber out the side launch bay." Hale nodded slowly. "The blast won't kill us." Knox looked at him. "Well, it might." Hale grunted, "So the usual." The two men worked side by side, prying open manual control boxes and overriding digital safeties that were already fried. Hale's hands were shaking, either from radiation exposure or the sheer strain of the last few hours. He wasn't sure. Every few seconds, the ship lurched again as its systems protested their own destruction. "You ever regret it?" Knox asked suddenly. Hale didn't look up. "What?" "Coming out here, commanding the ship, trusting Cassandra." Hale paused, staring at the console. A faint red light blinked at him, warning that they had less than 7 minutes before the overload. "I regret it every day," he said finally, "but I'd do it again." Knox nodded. "Me too." Suddenly the core gave a deep, rattling groan. The inner casings began to spin out of sync. Heat surged. "We're out of time," Knox snapped. "Cut the clamps." Hale yanked a lever hard enough to dislocate something in his shoulder. He didn't care. Alarms doubled in volume. A huge crash echoed as the magnetic seals around the core deactivated one by one. Knox slammed his fist into a manual eject switch, forcing it to move. Metal screamed. The deck shook violently. Then, with a sound like a deep exhale, the core detached. There was a moment of silence, and then a violent jolt as the launch bay behind the core fired the chamber out into space, one final burial for the weapon they should never have unleashed. The core floated for a second, glowing like a dying star. Then it detonated. From the bridge and across the fleet, they would later describe it as a second sunrise, a silent, blinding ball of white-blue fire that lit up the wreckage of the battlefield. Every ship turned their sensors to the explosion, certain the Vanguard had gone with it. But when the light faded, the Vanguard was still there, crippled, scarred, half-dead, but alive. Barely. Inside engineering, Hale and Knox were thrown against a wall by the shockwave. A pipe burst above them, pouring coolant onto the deck. Flames danced across the floor. The heat was unbearable. "Now that was a send-off," Knox muttered, coughing blood into his hand. Hale looked up, seeing only flickering lights and smoke. "Status," he croaked. Knox glanced at the one working screen. "We're stable, no chain reaction, core is gone, ship's crippled, but she's still breathing." Hale sagged against the wall, laughter bubbling up despite the pain in his ribs. "We did it," he whispered. A soft buzz came from his earpiece, somehow still functioning. A repeat. Vanguard, this is Admiral Vayoth of the Crescent Dawn. Come in. Is anyone alive aboard that ship? Hale tapped the comm. This is Captain Hale, he rasped. Still here, barely. Good God, came Vayoth's voice, half disbelief. We saw the blast, thought you were gone. We're moving to retrieve survivors now. Copy that, Hale said, but bring medical, a lot of medical. There was a long pause on the line. You destroyed their queen node, Vayoth said finally. The swarm's in full retreat, the tide just turned because of you. Hale looked around the ruined engineering deck. The body count, the blood, the scars on the walls. No, he said quietly. It turned because of them, the crew. All I did was point the ship in the right direction. The comms clicked off. The signal was weak but enough to confirm rescue ships were en route. Knox slumped beside him. So what now? Hale closed his eyes, listening to the silence. The ship was quiet now, wounded, resting. Now we let the Union take the credit, he muttered. They'll rebuild, hand out medals, rewrite history, and us, we disappear, fade back into myth. Knox nodded slowly, just the way you like it. Above them, emergency power flickered to life, barely enough to power life support. The Vanguard, the ship they all mocked, the slow relic, the cursed machine, had become a symbol, not of perfection but of persistence, of raw, angry survival. Marcus Hale sat back against the wall and waited for the medics to come. He didn't know what would happen next, if they'd rebuild the ship or bury it. But he knew one thing, the galaxy would never laugh at Earth again, not after this, not after her. 3 days later, Marcus Hale awoke in a sterile medbay aboard the Crescent Dawn. White lights, cold sheets, the faint hiss of oxygen systems, and the occasional chirp of a monitoring device filled the room. It was all too clean, too pristine, nothing like the familiar chaos and grime of the Vanguard. His left arm was bound in a regeneration sleeve, his ribs were taped, there was dried blood in his beard, his whole body ached like it had been chewed up and spit out by a star, but he was alive, barely. The door opened with a soft chime. A figure stepped inside, tall, elegant in her uniform and carrying a data pad like a sword. Admiral Vayoth. She stopped at the foot of his bed, arms crossed. You look like hell, she said, though her